Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, to my YouTube, to my blog, wherever you may be watching this. I am coming to you today with just a little reminder of a simple truth that the Lord brought to my heart this week. We have been hosting a team that consisted of an evangelist and his wife, his children, and then musicians that were here for an evangelistic meeting at our church this past week. It's been such a blessing. Well, aside from that, I just wanted to talk about one little way that God spoke to my heart. During the week, every day at noon, we provided a meal for this team. And on the day that I was assigned to help, one family provided rotisserie chickens from Sam's Club. Well, on a side note, I'll say those things are so good and such a deal for $5. So for $25, we were able to feed this whole team of people and have chicken left over for them to have sandwiches and things later. It's a great way to have a good meal. So they provided the chicken and some corn, and then I provided the other sides that went with the meal. When the meal was done, I had taken the chicken, I had sliced all the meat off of it and put it on a platter, and I had these chicken carcasses sitting in front of me, and I thought to myself, there is no way I can throw those in the trash can, because I knew that the leftovers of those would make incredible chicken stock. Now, I've been doing that for several years, and it's a very simple process. I've shared it here in my blog, and I will link that particular post here on this video. But it's just a means of taking the chicken carcass and adding water and then herbs and vegetables to create a really delicious chicken broth or stock to use for soups and other recipes for making great meals. So rather than taking these things and dumping them in the trash can, which I have done many times, I said, I'm not going to throw these things away. I put them back inside their little packages that they came in from Sam's Club, and I brought them home and I put them in my crock pot, and I added to that the water and the vegetables and fresh herbs that I had from my herb garden. And I got probably at least 12 cups of chicken stock that is now safely stored away in my freezer. And when I was doing all that process, I thought, it would be really easy to just think this is too much work and just throw them in the trash can. But I took them and I saved them, and then I was able to get something really helpful and useful for the days ahead. Now, let's make a spiritual application from this. How do we take a trial that God has brought us through and then make something useful out of it? Because that's what God wants to do. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Verse 29 goes on to say, for whom he did foreknow, he did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son. That's what God wants these things to do in our lives. A trial is made so that we can be conformed to the image of God's Son. And our evangelist would use the illustration that Romans 8:28 is like the skyscraper in our lives. When you go to the top of a skyscraper and you look out, you can see for miles around you. You have the perspective of being up so high that you can see for a long distance. Romans 8:28 gives us the perspective that we need when we're in the middle of a difficulty, because we know that God sees something that we cannot see. And he wants to do something in our lives to change us to be more like his Son. So when we're going through a trial, if we don't take that lesson that we've learned and mark it down somewhere, write it down, remember what God has taught us, rehearse it in our hearts, it's going to be wasted. We need to write it down and remember it so that we can use it to encourage someone else. We need to ask God to show us ways that we can be a blessing to someone else by using our trial. And rather than just taking it and saying, well, the trial is over, dump that time in the trash can. I mean, that was a waste of time in my life. No, we look at it and we say, okay, God, you want to take what seemed like an awful thing at the time, and you want to make something beautiful in my life. You want to make something that's going to be useful for me in the future. Help me to know how and when that you want to use this thing in my life to encourage myself or even someone else. I think the first key to that is just writing it down in a journal. Writing out every verse that God has used, every bit of encouragement that He's brought to you, every lesson that you can think of, every sin that He convicted you of. Write it down. You will be so encouraged by it yourself. But then you might be able to pull it out, just like in time to come, I will be pulling this chicken stock out of my freezer to use it to make chicken enchiladas. I could use it to make my potato soup. I use chicken stock in my chicken pot pies. It can be a blessing to someone else. Don't waste what God has given to you. A time of trial is God's looking out and seeing the perspective of what He wants to do in your life. So don't waste it. And now that we've been talking about not wasting what we've been given, let me show you how I make the chicken stock in my crock pot. And then you can take the next leftover chicken remains that you have and make something good. And while you do that, I hope you remember this lesson, not to waste what God has brought into your life. He wants to do something special with it. So let me show you some clips and some pictures, and you can make some good, delicious chicken stock to put in your freezer as well. Here we go. So here you can see my chicken container where my chicken was. I put it all inside of a crock pot. I added celery and onion just diced up into big chunks, and carrots and water and herbs. I put it in the crock pot for 6 hours on, I think on low, depending on your crock pot. Cover it up, and 6 hours later I take it and I strain it all through a strainer, and I'm left with this beautiful broth. Now you can see that there is grease on the top of it. I take the bowl and put it in the refrigerator, and that way then the fat hardens on the top of it, and I can literally just spoon it off, and it makes it a fat-free chicken broth. When you see that in the grocery store, they've just removed all the fat from the broth, and it's just a great, beautiful, look at how dark the liquid is. It's just really rich and delicious. There it is after I've taken most of the fat away. Then I take the liquid and I pour it into Ziploc bags, gallon size. I double bag them and I mark it well. Place the bags into a container just in case there's some leaks. So there you have it, friends. It's that easy. I hope you'll give this a try, and let me know in the comment section if you've ever made your own chicken broth and whether or not you'd be willing to try it this time. Remember, don't waste what you've been given. Bye. See you next time.